There's an old joke that Emma was asked by a woman in sacrament meeting why Joseph Smith had such a red face. Emma exclaimed and sighed, "Oh, Joseph tried to translate my soup pot this morning by sticking his head in it instead of his hat." Or you might be familiar with this one. Why didn't the U.S. pay the Mormons for their lost Missouri property? Well, Van Buren was ready to sign the check, but his wife came in, and Joseph made her his polyandrous wife on the spot. Annoyed, Van Buren tore up the check. Depending on your point of view, do you ever get the sneaky suspicion that Joseph Smith, whether fairly or unfairly, has been blamed for every single thing the Mormon Church did since its inception to the present day? This is another installment in my developing theory that the Joseph Smith and the early Mormons were counterintelligence agents for the United States, working against the British oligarchs and their infiltrators on the western states in Missouri and Illinois. The United States government was not unaware that there were British paid agents out on the prairie inciting the Indians against the United States leading up to the Civil War. Therefore, they were sending out citizens of the United States out to these prairie states that were infiltrated British agents such as Brigham Young and the Quorum of the 12, who were working nonstop to incite violence among the settlers and the Native Americans. Joseph Smith himself, 2 years before his death, identified Parley Pratt, Orson Hyde, Orson Pratt, John Page, and Brigham Young as his enemies. So now the Utah Mormon Church has taken the history and completely inverted it and blamed Joseph Smith for all the crimes of these British infiltrators and traitors to the United States, Brigham Young and the Quorum of the 12. Let me just tell you, Brigham Young was a ruthless, bloodthirsty tyrant. And the United States knew this before driving him out and then invading Utah as Brigham Young attempted to destroy the United States. The entire inversion of the Joseph Smith religion and early Mormonism presented today by the Utah Mormon Church is a testament to how strong brainwashing really is. For example, that one can read the Book of Mormon that preaches against secret oaths, secret fraternal brotherhoods, blood atonement, and my goodness, even polygamy was preached against by the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith. That this somehow can be presented as being the opposite. They've convinced generations of male missionaries that Joseph Smith just changed his mind, that even as you read the Book of Mormon preaching against all these secret oaths and combinations, the Mormon Utah Church has convinced their male hierarchy that whenever you read good, you must read bad. Whenever you read love, you must read hate. And whenever you read peace, you must read war. Yes, it's George Orwell and the Orwellian doublespeak on steroids. Simply is mind-boggling that adult men can swallow hook, line, and sinker the complete opposite story of what their eyes are actually reading. And even now, these proposed ex-Mormons, many of them fake ex-Mormons, they are paid chaos agents. They are leading the true ex-Mormons who are truth seekers down the primrose path again of all their lies. As Scott Peck said, these are people born of the lie, people who live the lie, and people who will die in the lie. So that anyone looking at the new website called the Joseph Smith Papers could possibly believe that one of these documents is authentic. Well, I've got some beachfront property in Arizona to sell you, and the London Bridge to boot. For example, it is clearly stated that most of the writings attributed to Joseph Smith appeared years after his death, that no one seemed to know anything about these writings who were contemporary to Joseph. Suddenly, in 2006 and 2008, just volumes after volumes after volumes of written works by Joseph Smith appears and published by the Utah Mormon Church. So in addition to the volume that we know and love by Joseph Smith, which is the Book of Mormon, we also have the original Book of Commandments, which later was put into the Book of Covenants, Doctrine and Covenants, that was significantly changed. We also have, guess what? The Pearl of Great Price, which everybody attributes to Joseph Smith, but there's no proof that Joseph Smith even knew that the Pearl of Great Price was written, translated around. The church adopted this volume called the Pearl of Great Price, Book of Abraham, Book of Moses, in the early 20th century. So why would anybody be blaming Joseph Smith for any of the things that ended up in a volume that he personally did not authorize as an authorized writing of the Mormon Church? So let's get into more silliness called Mormon scholarship, and that is the infamous Mormonism Unveiled, authored by the equally silly Eber Howe. This crazy little volume seems to be the Bible of all Mormon scholarship, because all Mormon scholarship begins and ends with Eber Howe and his sidekick called Flatus Hurlbutt, hurling Flatus out the butt, as we say in polite company. Eber Howe was a known occultist and theosophist. He states it in his autobiography, and both pro-Mormon and anti-Mormon use Eber Howe, a known occultist, to try and prove Joseph Smith was an occultist, when Joseph Smith was not. He was a document stealer. His family were the known scholars in ancient languages. Eber Howe was a complete and total fraud, making all Mormon scholars that rely on Eber Howe still to this very day. They may be unwitting frauds, but they certainly aren't good scholars. So going back to the original topic of Joseph Smith being blamed or credited with every known Mormon policy, book, treatise, artwork, musical work, orchestral arrangements, in addition to bedding down every single woman he ever met, making every single woman his polygamous wife. Oh, and by the way, creating a whole new constitutional monarchy based on an elaborate bureaucratic scheme. Oh, and by the way, talking all the while in this highfalutin King James language that was known only to be used by Oxford English trained scholars. Well, I'd say there'd have to be at least 10, 15, 20 Joseph Smiths, all in one man. Or maybe it's one man and 20 scribes that have been writing for over 200 years, inventing a complete farce of a history of the Mormon Church. So I challenge you, go to the Joseph Smith Papers website, and I, as an attorney, can tell you there's not one document published on this site that would be admissible in court as having the proper foundation to legitimize it as being both reliable and admissible as evidence. These documents on their very face show that they have been altered, changed, or completely made up after Joseph Smith's death. And why would you expect anything more from Brigham Young and his band of bandits who were wanted for counterfeiting and murder and mayhem, especially the blood atonement debacle that was happening in Utah, in which the United States government had to invade Utah to restore the law? I mean, these were bandits of the worst sort that Joseph Smith was warning about in the Book of Mormon. These are the Gadianton robbers, and these are the perpetrators of the worst crimes in United States history.